we gonna do?
Told you. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna watch a movie. We're gonna take some pictures. And then I'll pay you.
It's a day when people avoid walking under ladders and crossing black cats. It's also the namesake of a classic horror movie franchise. I am, of course, talking about Friday the 13th. Many consider Friday the 13th unlucky, a superstition that can truly affect someone's actions on that date. And sure, some lucky things have happened on that date, but even more creepier events have taken place on this date. The following stories come from Reddit, from real-life experiences, from people who claim that Friday the 13th brought these events on. Were these events tangled in fate or simply eerie coincidences? You decide. So get cozy, grab a snack, gather around the fire, and let me tell you some stories of Friday the 13th. From small town way upstate New York, myths and legends basically create themselves. One night, friends and I decide that we're going to venture out to this abandoned farmstead where supposedly a triple murder occurred. Typical high school teens with nothing to do. So we load up an SUV and trek out. Place is wicked remote. Nothing but the smell of cow dung and dirt. Definitely no cell service. So we get there. Place is super eerie. It's about 10:30 p.m. Car headlights are the only thing illuminating the house and the barn area. It's set away back off the road, so there's no street lights to be seen. The house itself was nothing special. In fact, it appeared that someone had been dumping their garbage inside for years. Classic scumbag move. The barn was a whole different story. Flashlights in hand, we entered the front door. The inside was filled with junk, but it was bizarrely organized as if corridors were established. We started to explore. Myself and a friend went up some stairs at the entrance to the hayloft. This is where things took a weird turn. At the top of the stairs began row after row of corn husks sharpened into spears, like to a ridiculous fine point. The husks were everywhere, as far in as we could see. We started to enter the maze, but then we heard a shriek from the ground level. A female friend and her sister had ventured farther into the barn. We went down and found them in a junk corridor surrounded with small handmade idols. I mean, hundreds of them. Each one with a twisted body and deformed face. In a panic, they told us they heard someone else in the barn. We told them to relax. We would have another vehicle pull up. But as we made for the front door of the barn, we heard a noise from the back half. In the light of our headlights, we could clearly see a man standing in the back of the barn. He didn't move or speak to us, just stood watching. We bolted for our cars. If he followed us, I would have known. There is no way I was turning to find out. We've never been back. The spookiest thing that ever happened to me on Friday the 13th was when I was 11. My friend had just moved into a house and she said her new house was haunted. I was a kid who was super into supernatural and paranormal and fantasy, but by this point, I was already starting to turn skeptic. But I mostly kept that to myself because it was fun to pretend I still believed. Anyway, it was a Friday, and for some reason my friend's whole family except her were out of the house for a few hours, and she invited me over to house sit with her. I can't remember if I spent the night. I think I did. We thought it would be fun to watch one of those ghost hunt shows. And at the part where Derek Akora was asking for the ghost to come out, my friend's video player turned on and started rewinding itself. This was a time before that was automated, and theirs was old. You have to rewind it yourself by pressing the button on the controller, and the controller was on the top of the video player, so it wasn't my friend playing with me. It scared us to death. But other than that, she's told me how other creepy things had been happening, like her sisters hearing someone whispering their name into their ears, and a clothes hanger being thrown across the room from the side of the room where no one was, and other things like that. I consider myself a skeptic today, but that still always creeps me out because I was there and my friend wasn't the kind of person to make stuff up. I think she was like me, skeptic, but still found it fun to talk about. I'm an amateur ghost hunter, so I have a handful. One that I find pretty spooky occurred at a cemetery with my boyfriend and a friend. Boyfriend doesn't believe in ghosts, other friend believes almost too much. I have a spirit box which scans through radio frequencies at a set rate. The theory is that spirits can communicate via radio. It ties into electromagnetism, another key principle in ghost hunting. I can always get into depth in explaining how things work if anyone has questions. My friend knew of a cemetery near her house, so we decided to go check it out. I brought the spirit box and an EMF meter, measures changes in surrounding electromagnetic field, as well as a camera, flashlights, and walkie-talkies. We arrived at the cemetery, and I noticed that the EMF meter was starting to pick up changes in the magnetic surroundings. This isn't out of the ordinary. The earth and nearby streetlights have magnetic fields that would affect the readings. We turned on the spirit box. I pointed a flashlight to a grave and asked, "Who is buried here?" A voice came through the spirit box giving the full name on the headstone. We repeated this 11 more times. 12 names were given, each in a different voice. The EMF meter started having bigger spikes than I'd ever seen. I think it was maxed to 15 points. Forget that unit of measure, but this was a big deal as it indicated high energy spirit activity. Granted, it was a cemetery. My skeptic boyfriend was terrified, and my other friend was ecstatic. I was without reaction. I'm desensitized to events like this. I'd say my house was pretty spooky. Nothing evil, but whatever is in the house likes to mess around with my longtime friend, Gilbert. Gilbert stayed with me and my family when we were both on breaks from college. He would hear and see things, and sometimes we'd both witness the same thing. He got used to it. This one incident about 2 summers ago, though, still boggles our minds. Gilbert had just bought some great weed from our sketchy manager and was dying to get into it. None of our friends smoke, so he didn't want to ask to use their places. I told him he could use mine, but it had to be when no one was home and had to be in the backyard. This day comes. Mom and brother are at work, and sister was too sick to drop by. Gilbert gets his stuff, I get some munchies to keep him company, and we head to the backyard. The sun was starting to set, the sky was pretty, and the weather felt nice. Gilbert gets his fill, and the mosquitoes start coming out, so we head inside. Except the door won't open. No big deal. Sometimes the door gets off its tracks. It's a sliding glass door. I tried to fix it, but it seems like it was in place just fine. We called my mom thinking she might have come home early and locked the door without realizing we were out there. Well, I'd forgotten that she'd left earlier that morning for a conference in another city. Sweet. So we assumed the same about my brother. We call his cell with no answer. He calls back from the store's phone. He gets off soon. only we saw someone that looked like him shuffling across the living room to the kitchen shortly before calling him. Javert doesn't say it, but I know what he's thinking. As a last measure, I call my sister to see if she's in the house. Nope, she's still on her couch, dying from a cold or hangover, can't remember. This eliminates anyone that has entry into our house at any given time. Javert gets paranoid, so I call my brother again to let him know what's up. We kept our eyes glued to the living room to see if whatever walked around my house would do it again. Spoiler alert, it didn't happen. Brother gets home and notes that the door is locked both ways, the lock by the handle and the bolt on the ground. That's what troubled me. The lock by the handle could have maybe accidentally latched down and locked us out, but the bolt is really hard to lock in place. As I mentioned earlier, loads of other things have happened in my house, but this was an interactive in a way. We just didn't see or hear something. It kept us from getting back into my house. Not the scariest incident, but probably the most spooky. Is Friday the 13th a day we should fear? Or is it just a day that we can use to heighten our awareness with our senses? I don't have the answers, but I'll leave that for you to decide. Until next time, stay sweet, stay smart, and stay safe.
On this Friday the 13th.